I faced my worst nightmare in the depths of a haunted cave and survived. I never should have opened that door. It stood there, whispering to me, like a dark secret I wasn't supposed to know. Just a rusty old thing, but the moment I laid eyes on it, a chill dripped down my spine. I was just an ordinary person. I had a routine. Coffee in the morning, a dull job, an evening spent on my couch. But that door, it changed everything. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the floor. I could smell the dampness lurking in the air, heavy and thick. When I pushed the door, it creaked like it was alive. Darkness poured out, swirling with a cold breath that wrapped around me. My heart thundered in my chest. Why did it feel like the walls were closing in? As I stepped inside, the world outside vanished. The air turned frigid, carrying ghostly whispers that curled around my ears. I squinted into the gloaming, straining to see through the dense shadows. Each step I took, the floor beneath me felt wrong, as if it might swallow me whole. The eerie silence was deafening, punctuated by the sporadic drips of water echoing in the void. Like a countdown, strange noises filled the cave. A soft scuffling. Was it just my imagination? I turned, and a flicker of movement caught my eye. My breath hitched. A tattered old figure danced at the edge of my vision, just beyond the reach of the dim light. I blinked, and it was gone. Was I losing my mind? Or was something else in there with me? I pressed on, my head spinning with every flickering light and shadow. The walls seemed to pulse, almost breathing like a beast. I could hear my own heartbeat, roaring in my ears. The dirt beneath felt alive, as if it wanted to pull me deeper into the suffocating darkness. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the cave. Panic surged in my veins. I whipped around, but there was nothing. Only the void stared back, breathless. I felt a lump rise in my throat. A heavy dread settled over me. I couldn't leave, couldn't escape what lurked in the corners. I needed to know. As I stepped further, a chilling draft brushed against me. And then in that frozen moment, I saw it. A figure. Tall and shadowy, emerging from the very heart of the cave, the air throbbed with terror. My scream lodged in my throat. The figure loomed closer, and just as it reached out, the ground trembled. A door slammed shut behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tremors subsided, leaving an eerie stillness that filled the cavern. My pulse raced, each beat pounding in my ears like an impending thunderstorm. The figure, shrouded in darkness, had vanished, but the air felt charged with its lingering presence. I turned slowly, desperate to catch a glimpse of it again, but only shadows greeted me. Where had it gone? The silence grew oppressive, settling in around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Suddenly, whispers curled through the air, low and beckoning. They wrapped around my thoughts, distorting my perception of reality. Help us, they murmured, voices layered in despair. Stay with us. I gripped the cold stone wall beside me, the surface slick with moisture, my fingers trembling as I edged deeper into the cave. The sensation of eyes upon me prickled my skin, a primal urge clawing at my sanity. Was I being watched? With each step, the whispers grew louder, an undercurrent of sorrow and fear. Images flickered behind my eyes, a flickering candle in an empty room, a child's soft cry echoing through a vast void. I gasped, choking on the sudden wave of grief that surged within me, as if I were experiencing memories I had never lived. It pushed me forward, deeper into the gloom. The walls began to shift, a slow undulation, as if something ancient and hungry was awakening. I pressed on, heart pounding, a primal fight or flight response igniting in my veins. My instinct screamed to turn back, to flee, but a magnetic pull drove me deeper, like a moth drawn to a candle's flame. Then, a flicker of light caught my attention, breaking through the darkness, a soft, flickering glow that danced in the distance. My heart leapt with a mix of fear and curiosity. Could it lead me to an escape, or was it a trap laid by the very horror that stalked me? I cautiously approached, feeling the weight of unseen beings crowding around me. As I neared the light, I stepped into an open chamber, illuminated by a shimmering glow that pulsed rhythmically, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. But the beauty of the light twisted into terror as I saw the Sorcian ancient altar, covered in what appeared to be centuries of dust and blood. It glimmered in the dimness, adorned with grotesque carvings that depicted figures frozen in terror, pleading for mercy, and then I heard a low, guttural growl emanating from behind me, rising from the depths of the cave like a storm. It wrapped around my throat, turning my breath to ice. I spun around, my heart stopped when I saw the figure re-emerging from the shadows. Not the same shadowy silhouette, but a mass of darkness, a writhing void that seemed to pulse and breathe. Faces appeared within the depths of that void, screaming mouths stretching in silent agony, their eyes wide with terror. This thing was no longer just a figure, it was a congregation of the damned, a harrowing chorus of lost souls trapped in a nightmare. They reached out, their skeletal hands clawing at the air, seeking liberation while pulling me into their abyss. That I stumbled back, bumping into the altar, and to my horror, I felt the ground beneath shift again. The walls were closing in. I turned to flee but stumbled, unable to balance on the trembling floor. I could feel the weight of their despair cutting into me like knives. The light, once inviting, flickered violently as the growl morphed into a deafening roar, and just when I thought I could find my footing, the ground gave way beneath me. An opening opened like a ravenous maw, pulling me into the depths. I fell, screaming, as darkness engulfed me. I was not alone anymore. I could hear the whispers, louder than ever, thrumming through my soul. They were pulling me in, warning me of what awaited below. As I plummeted, I felt a presence beneath me as if hands were waiting. A voice slithered through the shadows, "Welcome back." The free fall seemed eternal, each heartbeat amplifying the dread coiling in my stomach. The whispers swirled around me, an indecipherable chorus of voices clawing at the fringes of my mind. "Welcome back," echoed like an incantation, resonating off the walls of my consciousness. What had I left behind, and what awaited me below? Suddenly, I hit solid ground. The impact jarred me, sending shockwaves of pain rattling through my body. Dazed, I lay there in darkness, the cool earth pressing against me. I froze, listening intently. The whispers had receded, but I could feel the weight of the cave bearing down on my chest, thick and suffocating. Pushing myself up, I realized I was in a narrow passage, illuminated by the same mournful glimmer as before. The walls were slick with moisture and adorned with more of those ghastly carvings, and ahead, shadows flitted like fleeting memories. Panic surged anew as I took tentative steps forward, trying to find my bearings. Was the creature still chasing me? I dared not look back. The passage opened into a wider chamber, a sight that made my stomach churn, the remains of what looked like a ritual site. Bones lay strewn around, small, fragile, and long since picked clean. Some still had remnants of clothing clinging to them, the fabric tattered and stained. My breath caught in my throat as a wave of realization washed over me. These were not the remnants of animals, they were once human. In the center of the room stood another altar, more grotesque than the last, draped in colorful matted hair and surrounded by charred remnants of offerings, dolls and trinkets, twisted into eerie shapes, as if crafted to appease something powerful and malevolent. The atmosphere crackled with menace, and the air turned heavy with a dank, metallic smell, like blood and sweat mingling in dark corners. A soft rustle drew my gaze up, and I barely restrained a scream. Above me, perched on a ledge, were silhouettes, three figures contorted and emaciated, watching with hollow eyes that glittered in the faint light. Their mouths formed silent cries, as if they were desperate to warn me or plead for help. But I could feel their hopelessness, an exclamation that no salvation awaited them in this place. With each flicker of my torch, I swore the walls around me quivered, alive with the anguish of those who had traversed this path before me. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming that this was a trap, a nursery for the lost and damned. They had all fallen here and never left. Then, the ground beneath me began to tremble once more, ominously vibrating. In that heartbeat, the whispers returned with renewed vigor, swirling around me like a tempest of lost souls. My skin prickled as I felt a pressure, creeping up from the cracks in the stone, an unseen force inching towards me. Suddenly, a low grinding noise erupted, and the altar split open, revealing a deep chasm lined with sharpened stones, an abyss hungry for more victims. I turned to run, sprinting toward the exit, but the path I had come through was sealed, a wall of shadow rising up to trap me in the chamber. The figures above let out a chorus of wails, lamenting my fate as I felt the weight of despair descend like a shroud that I was not alone. The mass of darkness from before surged forth, emerging with a rapid, unnatural motion, engulfing the room in a blanket of dread. I could feel its presence looming, scraping at my sanity, each heartbeat echoing in tandem with the tortured cries merging into a singular, primal scream, the loss of countless souls. The darkness rushed at me, tendrils of shadow stretching forth with intent, wrapping around my legs. I struggled, fighting to free myself, but the despair clawed at my heart, threatening to drag me into the void alongside the souls trapped within the grotesque tapestry of suffering. Just as I thought my strength was failing, a breaking light flared from the altar's chasm, an unearthly glow that radiated an overwhelming power, dispelling the darkness momentarily. But then I saw it, a hand, clawed and skeletal, reaching out from the depths of the chasm toward me, signs of a deeper horror underlying all of this. I stumbled backward in horror, gasping for breath as I realized, if I didn't act fast, I would join the chorus of the Forsaken, forever lost in this accursed realm. And as the shadows closed in around me and I fought to regain my footing, I heard it again, a voice low and sinister, whispering, "Join us, join us." Before I could scream, the shadows surged forward, consuming me in darkness, plunging me into an endless nightmare from which there seemed no escape. Panic knotted in my throat as the cold darkness gripped me, the tendrils of shadow tightening like a noose. The sinister voice reverberated through my mind, an insidious invitation that sent shards of fear rippling through my very being. "Join us," it whispered again, invoking a sorrow that felt ancient and profound, as if the shadows sought to entice me with the promise of solace among the lost. With a surge of adrenaline, my instincts kicked in, and I fought against the consuming void. My legs churned against the damp earth, desperation lending me strength. But it felt as if the ground itself conspired against me, the floor shifting and buckling, trying to send me tumbling into the chasm where the skeletal hand beckoned with a tragic urgency. "No." I gasped out, the word vacillating between a plea and a defiant roar. With a newfound clarity, I turned my focus to the faint glow emanating from the chasm. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat alive with energy, casting eerie reflections on the cavern walls that danced like phantoms. Perhaps it held the key to my escape or a terrifying new chapter in this macabre tale I was unwittingly part of. The shadows recoiled momentarily, their grip loosening just enough for me to bolt toward the light. I stumbled closer, drawn by an inexplicable force. As I neared, the glow intensified, illuminating the chamber with a harsh brightness that felt almost tangible. Shadows skittered away, retreating to the periphery, but the skeletal hand remained, now joined by others twisted and grasping, bone fingers clawing at the air as if desperate for my touch. "Join us." The chorus became a cacophony of anguished cries now, the voices no longer merging into soliloquy but breaking into distinct, pitiful pleas. I dared to glance back. Those wretched figures above still stared, their mouths contorting in silent screams, eyes full of despair and hopelessness filling the chamber like a thick fog. Suddenly, the flickering light shifted, pulsating almost rhythmically in sync with the heart of the chasm. Within its depths, I glimpsed fleeting images, faces twisted in torment, expressions caught between a moment of ecstasy and anguish, each one reflecting my own potential fate. I swallowed hard, terror wrapping cold fingers around my spine. "Help us!" cried a voice separate from the others, drowning out the sinister whispers. A woman, her features distorted by suffering, filled my vision. Her eyes were wild, yet imbued with a flicker of recognition that sparkled to life as if she recognized me, a kindred spirit amidst the chaos. "Don't let it take you!" she shrieked, reaching toward me, her fingers brushing the precipice of the chasm. "Fight, don't abandon yourself, please." The shadows twisted wildly, surging back with violence, the darkness growing palpable, spitting wrath toward the glow. I stumbled backward, reeling from the overwhelming weight of their collective desperation, trapped souls clawing at me from the corners of my consciousness. Just then, the chasm erupted open wider, a crack splitting the ground, and from its depths surged a torrent of memories, long-buried emotions, and whispers of the departed that swirled around me in a cyclone of pain. I could feel them circling, blazing trails of luminous agony that left icy trails across my skin. "Join us," the voice taunted, more insistent now, as if tasting my fear. "You'll never escape alone." I closed my eyes as the torrent intensified, blocking out the raging chaos, searching for that flickering glow that suffused my heart with hope. Behind my eyelids, I could still hear the voices, each a memory, each a reminder of the world above the sun, the fresh air, laughter, warmth. With every ounce of willpower I could muster, I turned my mind back to the woman who had reached out for me, her imploring gaze burning into my memory. "I won't leave you," I cried against the encroaching darkness, defiance igniting within me. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, a deep guttural howling echoing through the chamber. The skeletal hand grasping for me felt sharp, like a warning, and newly emboldened, I lunged forward into the glow. My heart raced, a drum against the silence that enveloped me. But then, an icy wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the guiding light. Panic gripped me as I stood alone in suffocating darkness, the whispers crescendoing into maddening shrieks. It was then I realized something had changed in the air. The floor beneath me trembled once again, but it wasn't just the ground, it was the very essence of the cave, a living entity, shifting and undulating, a reminder that my time was running out. "Your choice," the voice hissed, lingering, coiling deeper into my psyche. Shadows began converging again, a mass of darkness encroaching upon me, hungry and relentless. Just as I thought I was about to be taken, I felt a sharp jolt in my chest, something pulling me back. I turned to face the abyss one last time, my heart pounding wildly in my ears. The woman's face flashed before me, her eyes never leaving mine, a final plea buried in their depths. And then, the cavern echoed with a single, chilling proclamation that shattered my resolve. "You are mine." The ground gave way beneath me, and I fell, swallowed by darkness just as the cavern erupted into chaos, voices mingling, a swirling vortex of despair. The last thing I saw was her hand reaching for me, longing and terrified, before the deep void enveloped me entirely, plunging me into an unfathomable abyss. I plummeted into an endless chasm where time felt distorted, wrenching my sense of reality into shards. The darkness wrapped around me like a leaden cloak, muffling the cacophony from above. My heart thundered, echoing in the vast nothingness, but in that silence, I heard them, the voices that haunted me just moments before, now fading into an eerie hum that I braced myself for impact, but the ground never came. Instead, the descent twisted, pulling me sideways as if the cave itself was contorting in its insatiable hunger. I felt an otherworldly current tugging at my very essence, straining on the tether of my soul. Panic surged anew. Where was I being taken? All at once, the dark broke. Ethereal blue light erupted around me, illuminating vast stone corridors and towering chambers with gargantuan stalagmites, sharp and menacing like curled talons poised to ensnare intruders. The atmosphere felt electric, thrumming with an energy that sent my skin prickling. The air was heavy with desperation and sorrow, a tangible pulse of anguish resonating through the dampness that I landed softly, disoriented yet unscathed, on a ledge that overlooked a grand hall. Even in my fear-drenched haze, I marveled at the sight. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols, snaking figures and faces twisted in horror, as if trapped in the act of pleading for mercy. But beneath those symbols, darker shapes twitched and writhed, as if alive with sorrowful intent. "What is this place?" I whispered aloud, the sound swallowed by the cavernous expanse, resonating off distant walls. "Welcome," a voice echoed, seductive and rich, flowing around me like a sly breeze. It coiled around my thoughts, soothing yet sinister. "You've come far, haven't you? To the heart of despair. You plunge deeper each time you resist. Would you like to see what awaits?" From the depths of shadows, forms began to unfurl, wretched silhouettes of the damned, their humanity plucked and discarded. Faces formed out of darkness, spilling forth agony and yearning. Each one locked in sorrow as blank eyes shimmered with lost hopes, pleading for resurrection. I staggered back, heart racing. The voices from above merged with these figures, the woman lost to the depths of despair, now a part of this grotesque gallery. "Help us!" they cried, a multitude of anguished whispers that surged like a waveform, engulfing me in despair. Their cries melded into an unending symphony of torment. "Join us. Find peace, find love, no I shouted, clamping my hands over my ears as if that could drown them out. But it only intensified their lament. I struggled against the tidal wave of sorrow bearing down upon me, an invisible current clawing at the edges of my resolve. I won't become one of you, yet the air thickened with their desperation, saturating my lungs, twisting my mind into knots. Every story they carried seeped into meth betrayals, the heartaches, the unsaid goodbyes. My sanctuary crumbled, and all I could feel was a gaping emptiness, a resonant void that invited me deeper into its fold. That I stumbled towards the edge of the ledge, gasping at the swirling void below. The shadows pulsed with life, and the whispers grew frantic, a cacophony of desperate souls clawing for recognition. It was intoxicating, the promise of release, the allure of becoming part of something eternal, something that would erase my pain. No. I cried, clutching the rock face in a fierce grasp. I was teetering on that precipice, a sinner at the gates of forgotten realms. I could feel a pull around me, almost magnetic, as if the very stones sought to consummate my surrender. Another light flickered closer, a flash of familiar warmth amidst the icy grip of despair. Fight! The woman's voice broke through the chorus, a single shimmering thread in a tapestry of anguish. You can't let them win. You must remember who you are. In that moment, it struck memories of my life resurfaced, warmth of laughter, the embrace of loved ones, and the gentle caress of sunlight. They surged forth like a tidal wave against the encroaching darkness, and suddenly, clarity pierced the fog. I breathed, pulling every fragment of joy I'd ever known toward me, shielding it against the sorrow beckoning from the abyss. But even as I fortified my will, I felt the shadows slacken their hold, slithering back while revealing a greater horror visage emerging from the darkness. A grotesque creature, a chimeric amalgamation of despair that seemed to mock my resolve. Its face grew from the darkness, a reflection of the woman I'd seen, except her features were marred by torment, lips twisted into a cruel grin. Do you think you are strong enough? It hissed, its voice a serpentine lure, echoing the sorrow that penetrated my thoughts. What lies ahead is far more than you can endure. Join us, or witness your demise. As it lunged forward, the shadows bolstered its frame, and I was forced to make a choice. The cold tendrils of doubt slithered into my heart, and the chasm behind me cracked open, a gaping mouth of nothingness, ready to swallow all traces of my existence. Your nightmares awaited. Breathed, and with a howl, the shadows converged. I braced for the inevitable, but the darkness turned upon me, revealing not only my fears but a new horror that rolled in waves behind the creature. A multitude of faces swarmed into view, each one familiar yet wretched, twisting in an echo of laughter that morphed into a heart-wrenching scream. All eyes focused on me. In that moment, I understood the depth of my terror. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was facing the very essence of all I had lost and all I could ever be. And then the ground erupted beneath me, launching me into the void, as those horrified faces reached out in a desperate plea. Do you remember us? I fell back, into the colorful embrace of the unknown, into darkness and blinding light, where my fate would be sealed, whether by my own choice or the chilling embrace of despair. I could not know. As I tumbled through the tearing fabric of reality, the sensations of falling and crashing merged into one searing infinite sensation. My heart raced as bright colors bled together, spiraling away from me like lost dreams. Shouting echoed all around, familiar yet twisted beyond recognition. Names. Faces. I grasped at the air, desperate to pull myself back, but the emptiness coiled tighter, stitching me into its dark design, and then, with a sudden jolt, I landed not softly this time, but crashing hard into a damp, cavernous floor. The cold seeped into my bones, a clammy embrace that left me gasping. Around me, the subterranean space pulsed with an inescapable dread, as though the very rocks wept for souls forever lost. I forced myself up, shaking off the remnants of starlight and despair, half expecting the creature or the faces that haunted my memory to snatch me back into the swirling void. Clutching the bruises on my arms, I glanced around. I stood in what appeared to be a massive chamber, illuminated by phosphorescent growths clinging to the stalactites above. They glowed with a sickly sweet luminescence, lighting up grotesque carvings etched into every surface. Shadows danced, shifting and swirling like living phantoms, and I could hear whispers, a familiar cadence that sent a shiver down my spine. Help us, they murmured. Stay with us forever. The shadows slid along the walls, drawing me toward the heart of the cavern, where a circle of light shone dimly, illuminating an altar as old as time itself. It was crafted from jagged stone, decorated with offerings of shattered bones and wilted flowers, a grotesque tribute to a malevolent force. The air around it crackled with ominous energy, as if the very fabric of my spirit vibrated in resonance with it. Suddenly, the air chilled, and I sensed a presence far greater than any I had faced. I was not alone. Instinctively, I tore my gaze from the altar, scanning the chamber. My breath hitched. There, materializing through the haze, came silhouettes of former friends' faces I knew but had long hoped to forget. They glided silently, their mouths moving in unison, framing a chilling invitation, their hands outstretched. "Join us," they chorused, drifting ever closer, an ethereal choir of lost souls. "You can have what you seek, the pain will cease. Forevermore no." I shouted, stumbling backward. Memories surged within me, each one a dagger digging deeper into the tender wounds of loss. I clenched my eyes shut, willing them away. But the truth clawed at me, relentless, insistent. I was drawn to them even as I pushed against the suffocating embrace of despair. "Remember," a voice whispered, delicate yet haunting. The woman from before, her features lost within the obsidian fog, yet her spirit resonated like a clarion call. "You have the power to break free." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me. A deep rumble echoed from the bowels of the cavern as the shadows writhed and convulsed. In that moment, the chamber shifted. Cracks splintered along the walls, dark tendrils creeping forth from the fissures like snakes set loose to feast on the light. The shadows darted, coalescing and rippling toward me, their cacophony growing unbearable as the faces of my past surged forward, merging with the darkness and becoming one blighted entity. The twist of laughter turned into a deafening roar that laced the air with a sense of impending doom. "What fate awaits you?" they screamed in unison. "Will you choose love or despair?" I was surrounded, trapped between the pressing shadows and the flickering light swirling at the altar. The echoes of their laughter, once joyous, morphed into shrieks of agony, drowning me in grief as I fought against the tide. Memories lashed at me like whips, tearing at my sanity. Images of failed friendships, lost loves, and missed chances enveloped me until I could see nothing else. Just when I was sure I couldn't take it anymore, I halted, chest heaving, my thoughts crystallizing into a single resolute truth. "No." The scream ripped from my throat, cutting through the din as I charged toward the altar, feeling the gravitational pull of the abyss slacken. "I choose to remember." The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by my defiance, and for the briefest instant, I caught a glimpse of the truth. The fractured shards of my experiences shone brighter than I had imagined. Memories of laughter, courage, and love surged forward, illuminating the darkness like stars in an empty sky. But just as hope kindled in my chest, the darkness advanced once more. The pleading faces twisted into masks of rage and sorrow, the churning shadows rushing forward, threatening to drown me. A singular figure broke free from their ranks, a monstrous version of myself, weaving through the darkness, merging fear and grief into a singularity of torment. "Do you really think you can escape?" it sneered, eyes glinting with malice. "You will be one of us." As it lunged for me, I braced myself, feeling the ground tremor once more beneath my feet. The abyss opened wide, a howling visage of denial and despair waiting to consume me whole. "Remember who you are." The woman's voice lingered like a lifeline just out of reach. With a forceful breath, I prepared to meet whatever horror awaited, knowing I stood on the brink of truth and oblivion. But just as the monster's grasp tightened around my throat, a brilliant light enveloped me, boiling from the altar itself, illuminating the chamber in ways that shattered shadow and darkness, and then a moaning scream erupted, echoing through the caverns, reverberating off every surface, as I was caught between enlightenment and annihilation, teetering on the knife's edge of fate. Whether I would ascend into salvation or plunge further into despair remained tantalizingly out of reach, the anticipation of my next heartbeat a suspended question, as reality teetered behind the veil of the unknown. The blinding light surged around me, casting away the gnashing darkness in a triumphant blaze, and for an instant, I thought I had won. But then the earth beneath me gave way, rocks crumbling into swirling shadows hungry for reprisal. Everything I had once known felt tenuous and fleeting. I was not victorious, simply delaying the inevitable. As the light flickered, revealing stark contours of the cavern, I felt the warmth draw back, replaced by the chill of despair licking at my skin. Panic crept in like an unwelcome guest, and I spun around, searching for a way out. But the chamber was a labyrinth of stone and shadow, twisting inward like a hungry maw. "Stay with us," the whispers wailed, now more urgent, more desperate as they entwined around my thoughts like vines, desperate to pull me into the depths of despair once more. I could feel the dark energy coiling in the air, intensifying as unseen eyes bore down on me, watching my every movement. They were waiting for me to falter. The altar, still aglow with light, beckoned me. I felt drawn to it, as if it were the last flicker of sanity in a world gone mad. I swallowed hard and willed my feet to move, but I was frozen, absorbed by how the light sparked against the darkness to hide and it would be to embrace my own demise. Out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed the monstrous version of myself, a grotesque whisper of my inner turmoil, edging closer, patient and predatory. "You cannot escape who you are," it hissed, a twisted smile spreading across its face filled with cracked teeth and sorrow. Despair coiled within me, a familiar embrace that felt suffocating yet comforting, like an old friend. Suddenly, something cold brushed against my ankle, a slick tendril of shadow slithering forth from the cavern's cracks. It coiled tighter, pulling me toward the edges of the abyss, where the light faltered, desperate to sweep me back into the maw of darkness. I fought against its grip, dredging up every ounce of strength. "Let go, a choice leads to life." The woman's voice, distant yet clear, interrupted the swirling cacophony of grief and evil. It was an anchor point, a reminder that the shadows may twist whoever they sought but would never fully claim me. With newfound fury, I focused on the altar, my desire to break free from the torment fueling me. "I am not yours to take," I screamed, throwing my hands toward the altar, and with them, I envisioned all the memories I wanted to reclaim, from laughter shared with friends at sunset to kisses taken in the cool night air. Each moment ignited within me, stirring the light to swell fiercely once more. The ground shook vehemently, as if the chamber itself protested against my will. The shadows stirred violently, the laughter twisting into shrieking howls that burrowed into the recesses of my mind. I could hear the anguished cries of those lost, drowning beneath the weight of my past, and it twisted my stomach. But in their pain, I found resolve. I would not succumb to the darkness. I would no longer let it rule my heart. That I closed my eyes, imagining a protective barrier, light pulsing out from me, and with it, tangible warmth igniting in the cavern, a phosphorescent bloom that pushed against the tendrils of shadow. "You do not own me," I cried, each syllable a burst of light against the encroaching horror. The shadows shrieked in fury as the light engulfed the chamber, freeing me from their grasp, but it came at a cost. As the brilliant illumination set the walls ablaze, a tremor shook the very foundation beneath me, and the screeches morphed into guttural cries as the darkness began to clump and coalesce, shifting wildly in my periphery. In the midst of the blinding brilliance, I caught fleeting glimpses of souls trapped within, faces familiar and distorting, seeking salvation that could never come. It struck deep within me, a stark reminder that no prison could hold me if I fought to remember those I had lost, to honor their pain instead of letting it consume me. But as the darkness writhed, it did not relent. With a thunderous roar, the cavern began collapsing. In on itself, the stone ceiling fractured, debris raining down. I stumbled backward, riding the chaos, a moment away from obliteration, grasping desperately for the light. Then I felt something, a jolt of warmth that sent shockwaves through my quaking body. It surged from the altar, a last-ditch effort to revive the light as shadows clawed at me, tightening their smothering embrace. Just then, a figure burst forward from the howling depths, luminous and fierce, a silhouette of hope. "Do not give in," a voice boomed above the chaos, impossibly familiar. The figure reached out, but I could not tell if it was an illusion or a real hand reaching for me as darkness consumed all around. "Remember." The echoing chant rose above the tumult, and in that final moment, as the shadows slammed into me, absorbing me with all their pain, the figure's eyes locked with mine, a whispering promise behind the cataclysmic roar. With a final lunge, I grasped for that fading light and the outstretched hand. I remember I shouted against the rushing black, and then I fell. I plummeted into an abyss swirled with echoes and shadows, each moment stretched into eternity. A heavy darkness encased me, thick and menacing, suffocating every breath I attempted to draw. My senses plunged into chaos, the familiar scent of damp earth, acrid and musty, mingled with the metallic tang of fear. I didn't know where I was, but the horrors of the cavern clung to me like a second skin. With a resounding thud, I landed hard on a cold, uneven surface stone, I realized, slick and riddled with unseen contours. Instinct kicked in, pushing me to scramble upright. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing faint silhouettes lurking at the edges of my vision. Hushed whispers fluttered through the air like the flapping of moths drawn to an unseen flame, a mosaic of voices that sounded both comforting and warning. "Help us, help her," they pleaded, urgently entwining their desperation with mine. Panic surged again, knotting my stomach as I staggered forward into the smothering gloom, trying to silence the whispers. They slithered along my skin and seeped into my mind, tugging at the threads of my consciousness. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts, their sorrow mingling with my own grief. "Who are you?" I shouted into the suffocating dark, but the only answer was an echo, a disjointed replica of my voice that curled into a sinister laughter, bouncing back at me. Movement caught my attention, and I turned sharply, catching a glimpse of a figure retreating into the darkness. The desperation surged through me anew. Surrendering to instinct, I followed, threading my way through the oppressive void, heart pounding, chasing after a shadowy silhouette that flickered like the dying embers of a fire. The ground beneath my feet shifted, gravel skittering away as I stumbled onward, my breaths quick and shallow. The air held a chill, not of temperature but of dread, thickening around me, oppressing my very spirit. As I pressed deeper, the walls of the cave drew closer, looming as though the stone itself breathed, tightening its grip on me. The walls whispered in tortured tones, love turned to sorrow, laughter turning into sobs. Then I stopped, flooded with a paradoxical sense of dread and familiarity. I could hear it now, a soft weeping, echoing through the cavern. It was a sound that resounded within my heart, an echo of something deep and broken. I rounded a corner, stone brushing against my fingertips, and there she was, spilling tears of shadow, a figure shrouded in darkness. "Mom?" My voice broke as I approached, disbelief flooding through me. The resemblance was uncanny, the haunting silhouette glimmering in the draped shadows, yet an unholy dissonance coiled around her essence, fragmenting it into something grotesque. "Help me, my child," she rasped, her voice layered with an unrealistically ethereal quality. Her hand reached out, fingers trembling, curling like roots desperate for light. "Mom, no, this can't be real." I wanted to cry out, but my throat constricted, the weight of despair suffocating me as the cavern twisted and undulated around us like a malevolent serpent. "No," she sobbed, voice cracking under the weight of something unexplainable. "I'm so lost, and you must be lost too. You must come find me. We can be whole again." The shadows coiled around her, dark tendrils lapping at her edges, swallowing her light while pouring itself into her presence. I felt my temples throb, a painful pulse echoing the conflict rising within. Met his was my mother, or at least the memory of her. And yet, deep down, I could almost hear a quiet plea from the depths of my consciousness, warning me to look away, to remember the truth. Suddenly, the ground shuddered, responding to the tears that pooled at her feet. "You have a choice." Her voice transformed, the sweetness replaced with a chilling detachment, each word laced with a sinister promise. "Stay with me, or the darkness will take you." I felt the shadows licking at my ankles, pulling me, urging me to surrender. Behind my blurred vision, the familiar figures shifted and danced like phantoms, beckoning with tormented cries that echoed before drowning in despair. The walls pulsated, and I felt my resolve waning, nostalgia mixing with dread. "No, I won't lose you again," I gasped, tears threatening to spill but my will to escape unfurling like a banner across my heart. With a final shout, I pushed against the darkness surrounding her, yearning to find the glimmer of light beneath the suffocating veil, but then she laughed, a sound so hollow and wicked it shattered my spirit. "Then you will find out how deep the darkness truly runs," she warned. The shadows exploded, thrumming with newfound life. And without warning, the cavern twisted once more, fissures opening up below my feet, an expanding chasm unfurling like a maw ready to consume me whole. I felt myself falling again, plunging into a void that echoed her cruel laughter. "Come find me." Her voice echoed, receding into the abyss, as a monstrous form emerged from the shadows, dark and formless, looming over me like a storm before the tempest. Just as I slipped away into the void, I caught a glimmer at the edge of my consciousness, a flicker of memory, a shattered reflection that whispered the truth. I screamed, but the darkness swallowed my voice, and all around me, I fell into the silence that answered back, and suddenly, there was only black. Darkness enveloped me, thick and palpable, a cloying fog that pressed against my skin and filled my lungs with dread. I floated in that abyss, weightless like a fragment of forgotten dreams, yet my mind raced through a whirlwind of terror. Memories danced just out of reach: me childhood home, our family gatherings, and that single moment where I last saw her, my mother, before shadows choked the light out of our lives. As I drifted deeper into that darkness, the echoes of my mother's mournful wail twisted into grotesque parodies of laughter, each tone spiking like a dagger in my heart. The laughter resonated through the very core of my being, vibrating through my bones like an ancient chant of something insidious. Just when I thought I had lost all sense of time and reality, a jolt of cold air awakened my senses, forcing me to feel again. With an involuntary gasp, I landed harshly on a concrete floor, my body jolted by the impact. Shivering, I pushed myself onto my hands and knees, struggling to regain my bearings in this unsettling new realm. The floor was slick beneath me, a rancid mixture of moisture and something utterly vile, a stench that clawed at the back of my throat. In the distance, flickering lights winked on and off like desperate signals of hope. I staggered toward them, driven by a primal need to escape the suffocating shadows that lurked behind me, swirling and whispering, threading through my mind. The further I ventured, the more grotesque the sights became. Blood-stained symbols marked the wall sigils and rituals, stained with remnants of offerings long forgotten in the annals of some unknown darkness. I reached the first flicker, a single candle lodged in a rusty holder, its flame flickering obstinately against the overwhelming darkness. Around it lay remnants of offerings: a necklace, a child's shoe, scraps of hair twisted and bent in brutal configurations. Each item seemed to pulse with a life of its own, inviting me closer, enticing, warning, all at once. "Help us," a voice murmured behind me, spectral and soft. I twisted around, heart hammering, but there was only shadow, a writhing mass that lurked just out of view, hungry and yearning. "Who's there?" The words trembled on my lips, but the darkness answered with a chill, wrapping tighter around my throat. I turned back to the candle, seeking solace in its fragile light, but the moment I directed my focus away, I felt its glow waver, as if disappointed in my betrayal. Hesitantly, I picked up the necklace, a tarnished locket I immediately recognized as belonging to my mother. My heart raced. How had it ended up here? I could still remember her fingers fastening it around her own neck during one summer evening. I flung it to the ground, rebelling against the swell of nostalgia threatening to drown me, fear clawing at my insides, but the shadows reacted, a low growl reverberating in the air, a collective lamentation that clawed its way forward, taking tangible form. I staggered back as the darkness swarmed, pooling at my feet, and from it emerged limbs long, spindly, grasping hands reaching out, searching for prey. "Please help me," a voice whimpered from the miasma, cloaked in pain and fear, a voice that twisted like a knife. I felt the weight of sorrow coiling around me, my breath hitching as I recognized it as a child's, melding with the sorrow of my mother's presence. A collective cry, a duet of despair from the depths of that horror, merged with my own anguish. Shaking my head, I realized I stood at a crossroads between my mother's torment and the child's plea. The walls around me pulsated, living and breathing, the very cave a malevolent entity intent on consuming what was left of my sanity. I turned to flee, heart racing, but the shadows surged, sprawling like tar, engulfing the flickers of light and dimming my path. I pressed against the walls, scraping skin against rough stone as I fought against the swell, desperate not to be swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Then, unexpectedly, a cold, bony hand clasped around my ankle. "Help me, help us, don't leave me here." The child's voice sobbed, pulling me down into the depths of despair. I kicked frantically, unable to break free of the iron grip that seemed to sap my strength, tethering me to the growing horrors. A flash of realization struck me with sharp clarity. I had a choice. I could face the darkness behind me, uncover whatever truth lay cloaked in its terrifying grip, or turn toward the shimmering promise of fleeting light that promised escape, but at what cost? With a surge of fury and defiance, I pulled myself up with every ounce of strength, feeling the shadows vent their rage, thrashing as I thrust forward, barely managing to break their anguished hold. "Maybe you took too long, maybe you shouldn't have come." The disembodied voice shrieked, reverberating through the cave, slicing through my resolve. Just as my foot cleared the darkness grasp, a blinding light flared in front of me, exploding into existence with an overwhelming brilliance. I turned to look, but what should have been a safe haven morphed into a maelstrom of chaos. Shapes elongated into horrifying forms, elongated figures cloaked in shadow, grinning with glee as they pointed at me, their eyes brimming with malice. "Welcome, welcome, we've been waiting for you," they crooned in unison, flickering like candle flames that reflected nothing but pure horror. The figure of my mother twisted at the back, her laugh mixing with the cacophony, leaving me to confront the realization that this wasn't over me. Constant struggle had merely begun, and then the ground lurched violently again. Another chasm opened wide before me, a yawning abyss that beckoned with promises of answers and anguish intertwined. An inescapable truth settled, confirming one resilience in the maelstrom of fear, and before I could rationalize my next move, I took a step forward, surrendering to the shadow's call. As the abyss consumed everything familiar, the echoes of my mother and the child tangled in a symphonic wail that reverberated through my being. The sensation of falling engulfed me again, and the darkness whispered in swirling tendrils, promising that soon, I would understand just how deep the despair truly ran. The void enveloped me, weightless yet pinning me down, a suffocating embrace that stifled any hope. I felt suspended, perfect for fear to twist and coil itself around my soul. My heart pulsed hard in my chest, echoing the proximity of something awakening in the darkness beyond. This felt different. This felt like returning home, the scent of sorrow thick in the air, the taste of despair sour on my tongue. Suddenly, I fell hard against unforgiving stone, the cacophony of sound rushing back, vibrations of murmured cries echoed all around me, swirling in a tempest of despair. Like a dissonant choir, they beckoned me, their collective sorrow whispering secrets to be unearthed. I forced myself to my feet, trembling from the impact, and peered into the shadows that danced maliciously across the walls. I remembered this chamber. It was where my nightmares lay, the space that housed lost remnants, the ephemeral promises my mind had tried so desperately to forget. I steadied my breath, focusing on the faint glimmers of light reflecting off shimmering stones. Here was the altar, the heart of the cave, the nexus of all that had been taken and all that I had lost. Stepping closer, the air grew heavy with memory, stitched tightly with threads of anguish and longing. "Help us," they groaned again, the voices now clear, pregnant with desperation, a grotesque amalgamation of familiar tones. And then I heard Ida's soft gasp, a voice that should have been forever lost. "Don't leave me." It floated to the surface, heavy with the weight of its own despair. My mother. I spun around, my heart racing, chasing the echoes of her phantom wail that coiled up my spine. "Mom!" I yelled, but the voice of my own hope drowned in the gloom that descended upon me like a storm closing in. She was here somewhere amidst the shadows and despair, waiting to pull me into that void of loss. "Where are you? Find me," her voice drifted, teasing. In that moment, the cave twisted, the walls bending toward me, the ground below shifting, threatening to swallow me and pull me into the depths of my darkest fears, but I pressed on, fueled by the glimmers of light and my desperate need to connect with that spectral presence. I moved swiftly through the cavern, the shadows skittering away as I focused on my mother's voice, the pull of her essence leading me deeper into the maw of despair. Up ahead, the shadows coalesced, forming a vague outlinea figure beckoning. "Come, my child," a voice dripped with honeyed malice, oozy tendrils searching for the cracks in my resolve. I broke into a sprint, weaving through the darkness and toward the dim glimmer that shimmered from the altar. But the closer I got, the more treacherous the terrain became. The echoes intensified, the shadows crescendoing with rage as if they objected to my trespass. And there she was, the Gid of my mother, a swirl of sorrow wreathed in shadows, only to be eclipsed by something sinister lurking behind. "Help us, please." The chorus pleaded, voices overlapping in a frenetic urgency, as the figures of the damned flickered briefly against the stone walls, their faces frozen in horror and longing. I charged forward, jostling against the malevolent energy throbbing in the cavern. As I neared the altar, a realization hit me, cold, a reflection, not just of my memories, but of the true expression of suffering anchored deep within. "Mom!" I called, reaching out. But the figure vanished into a swirl of despair that engulfed everything, darkness racing to suffocate my hope. And then the ground trembled, and in that moment of chaos, I saw her for who she really was. The shadows unveiled her, a ghastly visage warped and twisted by anguish, a caricature I almost didn't recognize. "You shouldn't have come back," she rasped, lips curling into a smile that dripped with malice, pulling me into a dead embrace. "Mom!" I gasped, stumbling backward, terror replacing hope. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me. "Join us. become one with despair. And I realized then, the thing before me was not just my mother but a reflection of everything wicked that this hell could manifest. Feeding on grief, transforming love into something grotesque, something unnatural. No! I shouted, summoning every ounce of strength left within me, a rigid fire fueling my defiance. I would not succumb to the shadows, would not let them take my essence. Desperation fueled my spirit as I rushed toward the altar. There had to be a key here, a secret, something to sever the ties of this darkness. The ground bucked violently, the shadows writhing with rage. You cannot escape. That voice, that snaking, seductive tone echoed through the cavern. I stumbled forward, feeling a pull towards the altar, just as a grotesque hand lashed out and grabbed hold of my ankle, dragging me back, whispering promises of oblivion and release. Join us. The words seemed to reverberate within me, calling forth memories of warmth entwined in sorrow, laughter like spells of stone echoing through forgotten halls. No! I would not abandon the people I loved. The shadows howled with anger as I broke free, stumbling toward the light that flickered just beyond. It promised truth, however painful, a connection unclouded by despair. And then I reached the altar. The moment my palm hit the worn stone, a burst of memories flooded me. Happiness, laughter, love. I saw it all twisted together, images of my childhood spent with friends, cherished moments void of dread. My heart thudded with determination, refusing to let despair overtake me. And then, the shadow-clad figures surged, closing in around me, whispering as they drew near. Join us. You don't have to fight it anymore. We will free you. Their voices twisted, a cacophony of sinister remorse that clawed at my sanity. The altar glowed under my palms, radiating warmth and trying to ward off the encroaching darkness. No! I yelled, the weight of love racing through me. You cannot have me. In that moment of clarity, I remember it was all intertwined with me. I was the one letting them in. Not anymore. I would bind my memories to this space, the shared laughter, the warmth, the love, and the eventual pain. Choosing to remember was choosing to embrace not just sorrow but also joy. The walls shook, the shadows recoiled, and I inhaled sharply as I pressed forward, the altar pulsing in rhythm with my heart's beat. I remember all of you, I shouted defiantly, melding memories into the sacred stone. I remember. The shadows wailed, retreating, thinning against the wave of brilliance emerging from within me, clinging against the edges of my consciousness. Stay with us, they whispered fiercely, their voices shrill and filled with terror. No! I retaliated, pouring every ounce of resolve into my words. I would refuse to be just another lost soul, a mere echo of time spent lingering in darkness. The cavern howled with fury, altering violently, shaking apart as the spark of light ignited deeper within me. Suddenly, as if the world shattered, I felt a tempest swirling. I sensed something larger awakening beneath the chamber-consuming dark tide that threatened to engulf everything. I was too far gone now, too connected to turn back. With one final surge of effort, I gripped the altar tightly, and the flow of memories burst forth. Light radiated, illuminating the intimate memories of every laugh shared, every tear shed, the very fabric of my humanity woven back together. The shadows shrieked, a visceral sound, as the light exploded outward, devouring the darkness in a storm of brilliance. I could feel their grip dissolving, the shadows clawing at me and ripping apart as I teetered on the brink of oblivion. And then, in one brilliant flash, warmth enveloped me, and I was free. I collapsed, gasping for breath, in a world painted with light and laughter once more. Yet the moment I sat up and looked around, a chilling refrain echoed through the air, a whisper that danced through both shadow and light. You have done well, but the door remains open. And suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye, dark form skittering at the edge of sight, wrapped in potent despair as the shadows stirred behind me, reminding me of the reality that not everything had been vanquished after all. I could still feel its presence that stayed, lurking just beyond the veil of understanding, a warning, a specter clinging to the edge of my soul. The cave might have wavered at my resolve, but the lurking shadows had merely retreated, not destroyed. As I took my first breath of fresh air, spilling into the world just beyond the darkened threshold, an echo of the sinister voice lingered in my ears, whispering through the walls of my haunted heart, hauntingly soft yet unmistakably sinister. Remember, we await your return.